and welcome back to Radio Gorepress. I'm Sarah. Joining me as ever is Phil. How are you doing, Philip?
I am good. For those of you who listened to our mini-sode, I believe I had my job audition, which apparently my sleep-addled brain decided to call it. Had my interview on Friday, and it was successful. I now have a position as a freelance animator at a local creative agency, which is very exciting.
That is fucking rad.
Yeah, it's going to be nice to have the kind of security of having a company that has me on their books, as it were, even though it's not like a permanent full-time position, just knowing that I'm, available and have that kind of to fall back on if necessary. It's very, very relieving. How are you?
I'm all right. It's just all go at the minute. I finished work on Friday. A weekend happened, and apparently I've done a full day at work on Monday, and now it's Monday evening, and I genuinely don't know how that happened. Do you ever find yourself, I don't know if this is just like a pandemic thing, but do you ever find yourself kind of zoning out and then going, oh, I'm just going to do, oh, no, it's tomorrow now. Mm-hmm. How did that happen? Mm-hmm. I keep doing that at the minute. I keep losing time. Yeah. It's very strange.
Well, like, I guess you're so like caught up in the day to day. It's like getting through each day, because I don't know about you, but there's very little to actually look forward to these days because of not being able to do much.
This is like it.
Day to day. And it seems like it drags and drags and drags. And then all of a sudden it's like 2 weeks from when I thought it was.
This is it, because every day is the same. So there's no events or holidays or anything to like anchor time. Because you can usually be like, oh, well, this happens in March and we're doing this in June. And it's like, no, every day is the same, fuckos. Yep. Enjoy it.
Get used to it. Not going to change anytime soon.
Well, I don't know. Bojo seems like he's trying to make moves to ease the lockdown. And there definitely won't be another lockdown.
God.
Asterisk. Take everything he says with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, smash cut to like 3 months down the line.
Anyway, probably the less said about that, the better.
Yeah.
This is episode 99.
I know. I was thinking about this earlier. Like every episode, I'm like, oh, this is episode 97. This is we're nearly at 100, Sarah.
I know.
100 episodes. How did that happen?
I don't, because we put out, 26 a year? So I feel like it's taken us a long time to get to this point, and we've been inching there very slowly, and all of a sudden it's like, 99! God, this one and the next one had better be good. No pressure, though.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
I'm excited, though. I think we've picked a good month for it, because we have, in recent years, tried very hard to celebrate Women in Horror Month somehow. February for the past few years, we've tried to cover sort of female-centric horror or female-directed horror, and just try and shine a light on some of the work that women in horror are doing. This year, we want to do that again, but we thought a better idea might perhaps be to honour Black History Month as well. So we're going to do it that way round. This episode is the Black History Month episode, or Black Horror, rather. And then the next episode, we're going to be doing... I'm not going to tell you what we're doing. I'm not going to give it away, but we're going to do something to do with women in horror. And I am so excited about both.
Sit tight, you guys. Sit tight.
I'm sitting tight too. What does that mean? Sit tight.
What's really
sitting
uncomfortable.
Loose?
Like sitting loose sounds so much more comfortable. Like I'd rather sit loose. Just
Let's
chill
sit
out,
loose.
sit loose. Starring Kevin Bacon. Sit loose.
Oh no. Do you know, for years I would sort of sing Footloose whenever it came on the radio or whatever. And for about 15 years, I realised a few years ago that for the majority of my adult life, I haven't been singing Footloose. I've been singing the garbled lyrics from Romy and Michelle's high school reunion.
Oh, no.
It's not the real lyrics. It's just noise that they made up. Which I guess you could use to describe all music.
Yeah, to be fair. Noise you made up, as in speaking.
What's this new noise that somebody made up that you're listening to? No, it's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? So we've already covered Jordan Peele's Oz.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly...
Which was a lot of fun.
I was about to say,
episode.
I didn't want to speak for both of us, but I think that was one of our better shows.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, not to like toot our own horns or anything. They're all good. Toot motherfuckers. But no, that was one that I think we got a lot out of, and we kind of really dug deep on that one, and it went well. So we decided we were going to cover Get Out this time. There were a couple on the shortlist, but I think ultimately you pushed for this one, didn't you?
Yeah, we'd spoken about Candyman, and I think certainly both have well respected within the kind of black horror subgenre, and both have a lot to say. But given Jordan Peele's involvement in Get Out, I thought that was perhaps, it felt more authentic, I suppose. Because obviously, like, Candyman written by Clive Barker, who's a white guy. Candyman directed by, I can't remember his name, but he was a white guy as well. So
Bernard Rose.
Yeah. It felt more kind of authentic.
Very dare you.
I know. And I call myself a horror fan. It just felt a bit more authentic to do Get Out, because that's obviously written and directed by Jordan Peele. Yeah.
I think this is the right choice. I think in terms of kind of importance to not only black horror, but just to the horror landscape in general, Get Out is just... I think it's so important to the horror landscape as a whole that it's sort of like, well, this came out before Get Out and this is post Get Out. You can almost use that as a marker for when things started to really change.
Yeah,
it really shook things up, I think.
And not just in horror, but kind of film as a whole.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to touch on that.
Having a horror film that is recognised by the Academy Awards.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
That's significant.
We'll get to that. It is significant, but I have my own beef with the Oscars.
Oh, okay.
We'll talk about that later.
Look forward to it.
Before we get too involved, though, I'm assuming anybody listening to this has seen Get Out. I'm assuming most horror fans or even film fans will have seen the film by now, but I'm going to give us a quick synopsis just as a refresher. So when Chris, a young African-American man, visits his white girlfriend's family estate, he becomes ensnared in the more sinister real reason for the invitation. At first, Chris reads the family's overly accommodating behaviour as nervous attempts to deal with their daughter's interracial relationship, but as the weekend progresses, a series of increasingly disturbing discoveries lead them to a truth he could never have imagined. This speculative thriller from Blumhouse and the mind of Jordan Peele is equal parts gripping thriller and provocative commentary. I'd forgotten it was Blumhouse.
Yeah, same. I was paying attention to the opening few idents, and like a bit of a surprise seeing Blumhouse.
I mean, when you think of, to me anyway, to my mind, when you think of horror movies that are sort of really noteworthy to the genre, award-winning, awards bait, I tend to think more of like maybe A24. Blumhouse is not the one I think of. That's more sort of... I don't want to sound judgmental when I say... Well, I think mainstream is fair.
Yeah, accessible, maybe.
I don't mean any of these terms in like a judgmental way. If you like big budget jump scare horror about creepy dolls, fucking have at it. I think that's great.
Mhm.
I'm a little bit creeped out that the minute I said creepy dolls, your daughter started
Could you
making
hear? I
noise in the
wasn't
background.
sure.
I could. I was
She's
just
way
like,
down.
Annabelle? Hello?
She's way downstairs. I wasn't sure if you heard her. Of course, the mics won't pick them up, so therefore, like, we'll just be going mad because we hear this like baby crying.
Well, I will testify to the fact that she has got quite the set of pipes on her.
Tell me about it.
So I think I'd forgotten how recent this film was as well.
Mm.
I've seen this film maybe 5 or 6 times at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely put it on like top 10 modern horror, like top 10 of the last 10 years, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've seen it so many times, I think I'd forgotten how new it still is.
Yeah. It's
2017.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Like, I think that's probably to do with how much impact it's had.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of transcended, not time, but because of having such a big impact upon the kind of film landscape, it's kind of detached from the actual timeline that it was made, because it's just become a bit of an icon. I think
right, a really good barometer for the sort of impact it's had is that it's a 4-year-old film written and directed by a black comedian, and it has its own Funko Pop.
Oh, really?
Yes, I own it.
Of course you do.
Sorry, not sorry. It's awesome. But actually, no, Funko Pops are awesome. They're horrible, homogenous little pieces of trash. But I still
as long as you can admit it, Sarah. As long as you can admit it.
I can. I'm not in denial. They're awful. I think a lot of them are really ugly. But for collectors, sometimes it's the only way to get a toy of a thing you like. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think if there's a Funko Pop of it, then it has some definite significance. That's a good gauge. That's a resting gauge. Is there a Funko Pop? No, well, no. Sorry.
Like,
move
screw
along.
Actual tangible like accolades and
it's not about box office or awards anymore.
Upending kind of the zeitgeist, the cultural zeitgeist at the time.
No.
Nah, Funko Pops.
Funko Pops are the cultural zeitgeist. That's it. In a tiny, beady little eyed bit of plastic. That's my hot take for the day. Right. Where do we start with this one? It's a bit dense and it's a bit overwhelming.
Well, I think actually it's a good place to pick up because I mean, first off, it's a riff on Halloween, which is fun.
Yeah. Do you know what?
Lakeith Stanfield walking down a street at night in a like white suburban neighborhood.
The most suburby suburbs that ever suburbed. And I am so ashamed to say that until I read that bit of trivia, I hadn't necessarily clocked that they were riffing on Halloween.
Oh,
but
really?
As soon as I read it, I was just like, of fucking course they are. Of course they are.
Like, I wouldn't have picked, I knew it was a riff, the idea of like someone walking alone in a unfamiliar neighborhood is a popular trope. I wouldn't have picked Halloween specifically, but I think that's probably more to do with my lack of familiarity with Halloween.
Okay. Yeah, we know your feelings on Halloween. We don't need to get into that again. God damn it. You and slashers.
I'm just going to not talk. You're not going to talk. You can do the episode yourself, Sarah.
Oh no, that's going to go terribly. You can't leave me hanging. I'll be nice. I'll be good. Come back.
But yeah, I think that kind of really sets the tone. It sets the scene of what the film is going to explore. In a really excellent way, because obviously, you know, it's very much a black story, and putting the audience in that situation all of a sudden, particularly for a white audience who wouldn't have experienced something like that before, you kind of realize that not all bets are off per se, but you realize there's a certain unfamiliarity to it, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Jordan Peele was sort of quoted as saying he made this for Black audiences. This is that was his intention anyway. And that even he was surprised how much white audiences embraced it and actually cheered for the Black characters.
For sure, yeah.
Which made me sad that was a surprise. But also, it is surprising. Like, I get it, but it's sad that in itself is notable.
I mean, I think maybe it's something we should, I don't know whether it's perhaps a good time to bring it up, but I suppose now's a good time as ever. But it, in a way, surprised me that it was for Black audiences, because it feels so... it feels like a bit of a satire on white liberal, anti-racist kind of audiences. So, and in that sense,
in what sense?
Well, like,
you mean
there's a certain amount of kind of. I'm just trying to get my thoughts in line.
Are you sitting loose?
Yeah, apparently
maybe
so.
That'll help.
Well, it's a bit of a cautionary tale, I suppose, of the dangers of being too visibly not anti-racist, because being anti-racist is very good, but there is a certain like white liberal subsection of society that's
just the virtue signaling.
Yeah, is in
bullshit.
danger of kind of doing just as much harm as.
Oh, I think I know what you mean. Like
racist,
the sort of people who will talk endlessly about a racial issue but insert themselves into it.
Yeah, sorry.
Just with the dad saying things like, "Oh, if I could have voted for Obama for a third term," it's like, no one asked, dude. Stop virtue signaling. I know exactly what you mean.
And the whole thing, they pride themselves as being supportive of kind of Black figures and culture, but in doing so, end up kind of fetishizing it and
they're still othering it.
Yeah, and othering it, and that's the danger, and that's why I think it was a bit of not a surprise per se, but why I thought it was just as much for white audiences as Black.
What's your take on the backlash that ensued after the film came out and the certain subset of I'm not even going to call them the certain subset of the horror audience. I'm going to call them what they are. Idiots that claimed this movie was racist because it was anti-white.
I think that is a bunch of people who are not used to being the bad guys in films kicking back.
But I can't imagine that level of fragility.
Yeah.
Can you imagine watching one film, one mainstream horror film where the protagonist, the main character, the person whose shoes you are in the whole time, purposely, is a Black man? Unacceptable. Racist. Firstly, racism against white people, not a thing. It's not real. Stop that. But also, it shocked me. And maybe it shouldn't have done. Maybe that makes me naive. But when I saw the backlash from people, I was just like, are you for real? This is your takeaway from this movie? About how you're being persecuted against?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, for sure. I think the idea of like, it's a bit of a, I think people instinctually kick back if there are ever white people, or some white people at least, if there are ever any accusations of racism. And I think that's due to a misunderstanding, because there's the overt kind of form of racism where you are calling sort of
using slurs
and such. But then there is another form of racism that is systemic, and it's about being a white person benefit from systemic racism, in turn kind of, you can understand why and not doing anything about it.
Yeah, just accepting it as the status quo and going, oh, well, this is just how it is.
Yeah, so that, I think, is a lot to do with why a lot of white people do tend to be very fragile when it comes to...
Well, yeah, nobody wants to think of themselves as the bad guy.
Of course not.
So I understand it on that level, but just like, seriously, have a word with yourselves at the same time. Just
have humility. Like, just don't take your ego out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Try and understand what's being said. And if that applies to you, like, learn from it. If it doesn't, just ignore it. Like, it's meant for someone else,
I find it very curious, and I think there's a lot of parallels in the racial imbalance as there are in the basically what the feminist movement campaigns for. You can draw a lot of parallels between the same two. I'm not comparing them. I'm just saying there are parallels.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, what threatens you? What do you think will change if we're all given equal rights? What do you think you're going to have to surrender? I find that really curious. Like, is your life genuinely going to be made so much worse if somebody else has an equal amount of power and right to you? Or might the world be a nicer place?
Yeah.
It's so strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this film does a really good job of kind of poking holes in some of those arguments and just highlighting the absurdity of this complex that a lot of white people have about not necessarily superiority, but just like a refusal to turn it around on themselves and do any sort of self-examination.
And I think that's why I was keen to do this one, because it does explore racism in a very different way to maybe any other film I've seen. Because it's as we've spoken about, it's still othering, but it's almost a fetishization rather than a sort of offensive version of racism,
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting. Sorry, to go back to what we were talking about, that opening scene. I'm really grateful that the first character that we see is a black man. I think that's important. I think there's a load of stuff that's kind of been pointed out by other people, and I can't take credit for all of the points that I've brought up. Some of it has been kind of posted about on YouTube and Letterboxd or whatever else. So I'm going to go through some of the kind of fan theories and bits of trivia, I guess, whenever they're relevant. When Lakeith Stanfield's character is on the phone, he's asking, I think he's trying to find Peacock Avenue.
Okay.
And a lot of people sort of have theories about that kind of mirroring the whole, like, do you know what peacocking is?
In terms of, like...
It's generally something that's done by males to attract females.
Yeah, so it's...
Yeah, showing off, to break it right down. So a lot of people think it's kind of to do with that, like, except it's doing what it does with everything in this film and flipping it on its head, where she's the one who's doing this thing to kind of catch his attention and, I mean, quite literally capture him.
Yeah.
And I think it's also quite interesting that when, like, whoever's on the phone is either also in the car or is communicating with the person in the car, because as soon as the conversation hits a certain point, the car turns around.
Oh, okay.
So they're clearly in contact with the person in the car. And it's stuff like that I love, because it only makes sense on a second viewing.
Yeah.
It only makes sense once you know what's going on. So it wasn't like they drove... Well, when you find out sort of later on in the film that this is something that the Armitage family has done time and time again, and Rose kind of attracts these men, and it wasn't just like a random attack.
And women.
This is clearly... And women, yes. But this is clearly somebody she was like in a relationship with, was dating for a while. And she's obviously the one on the other end of the phone saying, oh no, these are the directions. You have to go to this address. And at that point, the car turns around.
Okay.
I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
I also thought, sorry.
No, I was going to say, well, they use the car starts playing Run Rabbit Run, doesn't it? So it's not just kind of a idle, that there's a threat there. There's intimidation there.
Mm-hmm. Intimidation tactics. Also, I think it kind of, I don't know the significance of the song itself. I would be surprised if they'd just chosen a song at random that kind of had a vague thematic element. Yeah. I feel like maybe the time period that the song was made in, because it's quite an old song, kind of reflects the antiquated views of the family. And that you could open up a whole can of worms.
Yeah, for sure.
Digging into this film. I also think it's really interesting that the car is, it's a white car, but it has black interiors.
Oh, really? I didn't pick up on that.
Even the car.
I did pick up on later on when all of the family show up to the party. They all turn up in black cars.
Do they?
Yeah, I'm almost certain they do. Because I remember thinking, how much it looked like a funeral. Right. Yeah, the idea of all these black cars showing up. I could be misremembering, or it could be cherry picking a little. But
that's interesting.
Knowing how much significance, and how much detail Jordan Peele puts into these films, it wouldn't surprise me.
I think it's one of those films where any fan theory that you come up with, you watch some films and you're like, oh, I wonder if this was this color because of this, and sometimes the director just was like, whatever they had to hand, or I dated somebody who was a filmmaker, and I think he was interviewed once, and the interviewer was kind of like, oh, why did you make the balloons in this scene red? And he was just like, I just wanted them to be red. I think that happens a lot in filmmaking, but you're right in that Jordan Peele is such a purposeful filmmaker. I don't think anything was left to chance. I think it's very easy to feel like you're reading too much into some stuff, but I think this is an exception.
Yeah. I'm glad you agree with that then. But yeah, no, I didn't pick up on the white car at the start. But yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
And something that was something that I read in the trivia that was actually more or less axed from the final cut of the film. Apparently there's a shot in the trailer where you can see the driver of the car, which I guess we're to assume is Jeremy. Mm-hmm. The brother, just because of how, does he put him in a headlock?
I think so, yeah.
I think, or uses chloroform or something. It's kind of, it's heavily hinted at that it's him based on conversations that he has over dinner, and his obsession with putting people in headlocks and MMA fighting and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I do think that's interesting. And I can't remember if we actually get to see it at all. I think there's a shot of a knight's helmet at some point, but that was expanded on far more in the original cut of the film.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, most of that hit the cutting room floor, and it's to do with the Knights Templar and with the dual meaning of I think the Ku Klux Klan Knights were sort of the even more extreme wing of the Ku Klux Klan. So this whole sort of knight imagery was very intentional, and I'm kind of sad that didn't necessarily make the final cut. I think that would have been interesting, but I guess he didn't want to overcomplicate things too much.
Yeah.
And then obviously we meet Chris and Rose. Even the scenes when he's in his flat, you see him shaving, sort of putting a white substance over quite a large portion of his face. There's loads of stuff like that. There's a photograph that he took in his flat, a framed photograph of a young white girl holding up a mask.
Okay.
So much foreshadowing.
Oh, really?
About just sort of white people, I mean, I guess in a very literal sense in this movie, wearing, a mask.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think, again, it's stuff like that you only necessarily pick up on like second and third viewing.
Yeah, I need with that in mind, like I haven't really picked up on the mise en scène sort of elements. I think on a rewatch, I'll try and pick out those because that sounds really interesting. And there's so much, like you said, so much foreshadowing and so many references to the themes of the movie as a whole.
But down to the set dressing, when he answers the door to Rose, there's a light switch right next to his head, and it looks like a pair of open handcuffs.
Oh, really?
There's just so much, and nothing is accidental. This is what I mean when I say like he's such a purposeful filmmaker.
Yeah.
It's so intricate and kind of genius throughout. But yeah, so we're given a little bit of a glimpse into the dynamics of their relationship and what he's about to have to endure.
Yeah.
Or what he thinks he's going to have to endure. And then they hit the road. And then they're stopped by police. Yeah. And obviously, the first time you see this scene, it paints her in quite a positive light.
Yeah. Because she is trying her best to be, or seemingly trying her best to be, like anti-racist, to be to pick up on the discrimination that Chris is facing.
Yeah, I think it does paint her in quite a good light. And again, it's not necessarily something that you pick up on until much later in the film, or even perhaps a second watch, and you realise that actually it's far more likely that she's trying to talk her way out of it to avoid a paper trail. Because if he's booked, then that puts the two of them together.
Okay, I hadn't picked up on that. I thought it was just trying to portray her in a very, very sympathetic light, because that's what they do throughout. That's why, we'll get back to it, but that's part of the reason why this film is so devastating, because until that moment, you're always under the impression that Rose is on
that she's
Chris's
a good
side.
guy.
Yeah, and she's the one like beacon that Chris has in that family.
Well, I think again, you're right, and it does make it even more devastating because obviously we learn about what happened with his actual family and how his mum died and how traumatic that was. So to him, like, Rose has become family. And I believe, like, there's one scene where they're by the lake and I think it's after the part where he keeps finding his phone unplugged.
Okay, yeah.
And he's like, something's not right here, I want to leave. And she convinces him to stay. And apparently during that scene, Daniel Kaluuya couldn't understand. He had to get Jordan Peele to explain to him why on earth because if it had been him, his instincts would have just been, fucking leave, get the hell out of there. This was after the garden party, after all the weirdness. Like, why wouldn't he have just hightailed it out of there? And Jordan Peele sort of explained, like, this is a man who doesn't have a family. He left his mum to die, ostensibly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, to be honest, I think the character bears a bit too much of the guilt from that, but I understand it, I suppose. But he kind of sees Rose as his family, and he wants desperately to be the person that sticks around.
Yeah,
for his
that makes
family.
sense. And I think that's important because obviously, you know, the whole idea of the film itself is called Get Out, and that's a reflection on how a lot of, from what I've read, a lot of kind of black audiences ridicule white horror in that characters are dumb and make dumb decisions just for the purpose of the plot. And so, you know, Jordan Peele wouldn't have made that decision lightly because he knows, he understands why the film was made. You know, what caused that, why it's called what it is. You know, and so if he was able to justify that in his own head, then obviously, you know, that makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah, I do think that's interesting. I had read that he kind of titled it that way because that was something that Black audiences weren't sort of stereotyped or known to like shout at the screen sometimes. And like I say, rightly so.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if that's because, without wanting to sound like reductive or like I know what the Black experience is, because fuck me, I do not. I never will. But I wonder if that's because they encounter so much more like legitimate danger in their day-to-day lives, so they're less tolerant of idiotic decisions and people that don't remove themselves from dangerous situations.
Yeah, I mean, we both watched Horror Noir, the kind of documentary on kind of Black culture and horror. And certainly that was the impression I seemed to get. Like a lot of, from what I've gathered, kind of a lot of, as you say, the experience comes from self-protection, you know, and that's not something as white people we've much had to experience because of our, you know, of our race.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, like, I mean, I'm not saying I've had it hard. Do not get me wrong. But I would say, I think as women, it's perhaps maybe a little bit easier to empathize because there are a lot of instances, not in the past year, funnily enough, when I've been holed up in my house doing nothing, but there's a lot of times in my life where I've been like, you feel on high alert a lot of the time. In open like spaces, or if you're alone,
if you're walking alone at night.
If it's dark, or even during the day. But I feel like that's probably a fraction of the Black experience. And obviously, if I get stopped by police, I know it's not going to go poorly. Like, I'm going to walk away from that unscathed. But to have the worry that that's not true, that the opposite might be true, and for that to be constant is unimaginable.
Which explains why the different reactions when they get pulled over by the police on the way to
and
their
he's
parents,
just like, comply, head down, just do what he's saying.
Exactly, because it's
but she feels emboldened enough to question him because she knows nothing bad's going to happen to her. I thought that was a really kind of succinct way of displaying how two completely different people would behave in the same sort of situation.
And does a fantastic job of foreshadowing the end of the film.
Yes, I'm excited to talk about that. Obviously, on the way there, this is something that I wasn't aware of and hadn't considered until I saw it in somebody else's breakdown. I think it was mentioned in a review that I read. They hit a deer on the way to her family's home. Now, that sort of thing is something that happens in horror films. So I didn't necessarily overthink it the first time I saw it. I was just like, oh, spooky thing. This thing died, you know. But obviously, when you find out that his mum basically died in the road or by the side of the road, it explains why he's kind of lingering after they've hit the deer and they see it dying. Like, he's kind of reluctant to leave it. Which kind of makes it a little bit heartbreaking the more you know about the situation. And also something that I absolutely was totally ignorant of the first few times I watched this film is the significance of the deer and the fact that it's a motif that keeps coming up throughout the film, because apparently like black buck or just buck was a derogatory term used for black men. I think it was used in slavery, and also kind of, from my understanding of it, is it was a slur thrown at black men who wouldn't like toe the line, who questioned people in power and authority, which was you know, everyone else. So I think that's really fucking clever, and I kind of have a newfound appreciation of that little kind of running thread. And it's so satisfying when at the end of the film, obviously, spoiler alert, we're gonna cover it properly. But the moment where he uses the taxidermy deer as a weapon, uses it to his advantage. But it also makes sense. Like the dad kind of, doesn't he make remarks about how he hates deer and sort of thinks they're less than, and he has a particular dislike of them.
Yeah, because when they get to the Armitages, he's very dismissive of the fact they ran over a deer on the way over. Doesn't really sympathise with that.
Disposable.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good kind of. It's really emblematic of his overarching opinions. Yeah. Something that caught my eye when I was reading up about the film is I read an article, not an article rather. I read an interview with Jordan Peele. I think around the time the film came out, and I seem to remember reading that Jordan Peele had obviously originally wanted the role to go to an African American man.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know how many people he saw during the casting process, but apparently he sat with Daniel Kaluuya and they talked about it, and Peele wasn't convinced to begin with. But the more they chatted kind of informally, the more Jordan Peele realised that the parallels between racism in the UK and the US are very similar. Because I think in his mind, perhaps it was about an African-American man, so only an American man could embody the character, I guess, was his thinking. But then he realised that there were such strong parallels between the racism in both countries and cultures.
Yeah.
And apparently after that point, he was so impressed with Daniel Kaluuya that he hired him on the spot.
Oh, okay.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and he does a fantastic job of it as well.
His American accent, can we just say, I have like a thing about accents. They can make or break a film for me. Phenomenal. Would never know. Would never know.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I was watching a YouTube video today. It was a guy called Eric Singer, who is a pretty kind of, he finds himself on YouTube videos a lot. He's a dialect coach.
Okay.
And it was about how and why Americans find it so difficult to do British accents.
Okay.
But he kind of reversed it and said, well, how about all the Brits that can do really good American accents? And he pointed at Kaluuya as one of them. And in Get Out, and how amazing and it's so kind of accurate his accent is.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. Like, I'm pretty attuned to when an accent is off. And I would never, had I not seen him in Skins all those years ago, and Psychoville, he was in Psychoville as well.
That, I think Psychoville was the thing that Jordan Peele had seen that actually
really
made him interested in Kaluuya as the
tea leaf. It's so good. He was good in that as well, actually. Also, we haven't talked about the music.
Yeah.
The music choices in this are really interesting. Kind of all over the place. We've got the Childish Gambino track at the start, which lyrically is very relevant.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. The idea of, because it's Redbone, isn't it? So it's about, I think it's about, from what I've gathered, Donald Glover's paranoia about infidelity, essentially.
Okay.
So there's a lot of kind of conversations about staying woke, or like lyrics about staying woke and opening your eyes and such.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know the meaning of the song.
I think if I interpreted it correctly, I might have misremembered slightly, but I think that's the overall theme of the song. Which again really points to Rose as well, like multiple partners.
That's true, yeah. That wouldn't have crossed my mind. I really like Childish Gambino. I like Donald Glover. I particularly like that if you shorten his name and use the informal version, that it is Don Glover.
I can't remember whether it was real or not, but I do remember him, or it might be like apocryphal, but like a Twitter handle or something that he'd had that was Dong Lover. He realised it said Dong Lover.
I remember the same thing, but I don't know if it's genuine or not.
It's probably one of those things that's completely yes.
I desperately hope it's true. The 12-year-old version of me desperately hopes that's true. Fuck it. The 38-year-old version of me also hopes it's true. Who am I kidding?
No shame in that.
I'm not convincing anybody that I'm in any way, shape, or form mature. So, the first time you saw this, did we watch it together?
Did we go to the cinema, or did you show it to me? I think you might have shown it to me, come to think of it.
I was trying to remember this earlier. I think we either went to the cinema or we watched it at my house. What were your first impressions the first time you watched it? And were you... basically, I'm really interested to know whether or not you were as caught off guard as I was when it comes to the humour.
I mean, I think I was, but in retrospect, it probably didn't surprise. It doesn't surprise me, because as much as horror's Jordan Peele's favorite genre, he is known for being a comedian. He's in comedy.
No, that's fair. I think I don't think I knew much about the film when I first saw it, and I was really kind of blindsided by how funny it was. And it was definitely one of those instances where, have you ever kind of watched a film that was perhaps, I don't know the best way to phrase it, like maybe inappropriately funny?
Yeah.
And
you weren't
find
sure whether
yourself,
you're supposed to be laughing or not.
Yeah, you find yourself laughing, but you're also sort of like looking around at other people going, is everyone else laughing? Am I mad? Like, is this okay? Can I laugh at this? It was one of those. Which again, I found really interesting in terms of like self-reflection. Like, why did it make me uncomfortable? Why did I think maybe it wasn't okay to laugh? And I think perhaps it's just because it does deal with such serious real world issues.
Yeah.
That it was like, can we also find humor in this? I guess we can. Yeah. But it was a surprise. It was a real shock to me.
I think that is perfectly understandable. You know, it's a serious issue that the film is exploring. Yeah. And yeah, I can fully understand that particularly if you were in a cinema with other people, that you'd feel really self-conscious about actually laughing until you were comfortable that like, oh no, this is meant to be funny. Because, you know, certainly with Rod, you know, the kind of calls that Chris has with him.
Well, I think to be honest, it was the introduction of his character that was a turning point, because up until then, it was just played completely straight.
Yeah.
There wasn't really any humour in it. And then he's introduced, and his kind of bits at the TSA and like his interactions with the police when he's trying to recount that he thinks his friend is missing and that his girlfriend might be evil. And they're, you know, the cops are sort of disbelieving. And I was just like, oh no, this is kind of like a genius melding of genres.
Yeah.
But it wasn't...
Sorry.
I was just going to say, it wasn't until that point that I realised like how expertly he has woven horror and comedy together, because that's fucking hard to do.
Yeah, I think keeping it to Rod was a sensible move.
Yes.
Because he exists kind of outside that story, and as a character, he's just a funny, charismatic guy, you know? It's not like there was whiplash or characters were suddenly behaving out of character.
Yeah.
You know, everything was very cohesive. He was just it's a funny, entertaining guy. And that was why he, as a character, is funny. And that's why, because, again, the police are existing outside of that world that he was establishing, the Armitage world. That was why that scene could be funny, because all of a sudden there's this, you've removed a level from the actual story, and you can kind of see how ridiculous it would sound to other people, you know?
Yeah. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Like, there are points with the Armitages that are humorous as well.
Mm.
And like I say, I think Peele did a really good job of like mashing the genres together and coming out with a really well-rounded, cohesive film.
Yeah.
And it's still not one that I would call a horror comedy.
No.
But he's achieved comedy and it's good. Like, I don't it's such a fine line. Do you know what I mean? It's so nuanced. I think you're right. I think because he has such a good understanding of comedy, I think because that's his background, he is perhaps able to Trojan horse some comedy in.
Yeah.
without it feeling too out of place.
Yeah. And I've said this a bunch of times. I'm sure you're tired of me saying it, but horror and comedy have so much in common as sort of genres. Like, the themes are different and the topics are different, but both deal with the rise and fall of tension, coupled with punchlines, which are, often jump scares. Like,
the beats are the same.
Someone who understands the beats of comedy and how to build an audience up before the release of tension with the punchline will have a natural understanding of doing the same with horror. So I think being a comedian gives him that kind of skill to balance them really well, you know?
At what point do you think you started to piece together the story? Because I think one of the reasons I love this film so much on first viewing is that I didn't know where the fuck it was going.
Yeah.
I love a good bit of unpredictability.
I think because the actual modus operandi of the Armitages is so batshit crazy, it's
hard to second guess.
Like, something's up. You know that there is something sinister going on because of just how the people are outside of the actual events of what happens within the film. Just when they're being normal, when everyone's chatting and laughing, you can tell there is something sinister going on. I wouldn't have known what that was until it almost happened, really.
I think they do a really good job of sort of highlighting some of the reasons for racism as well. And the fact that some of it can be boiled down to jealousy, not necessarily just fear of other, but I think jealousy in some cases, not in all, but the fact that a lot of, white people might be jealous of the fact that Black people have a better kind of physical prowess or more gifted in certain areas. And I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of the time you do just assume it's just like, oh, they're a different color to me, I don't like them. But actually, there are so many varied reasons for racism.
Yeah, it's a lot more complex than that. Like, realistically, a lot of white culture has co-opted Black culture.
Massively.
For decades, if not more. You can almost trace a direct line from music as we know it today to jazz, which was, of course, influenced in itself by Black culture, Black music. It's almost a direct line. So,
well, all of it, blues.
Exactly,
the fucking Beatles.
Yeah.
All of their, but it all started with Black culture. All of it, like, God, the Northern Soul movement. It was all white people, working class white people in the North, who just found this kind of unsung Black music and fell in love with it and created a movement around it. But it wasn't theirs.
Yeah.
It was still all borrowed. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, they're better at us than this, so we'll steal it, but we'll still keep them down so they can't benefit from us stealing it, or
which is
it's fucked up. It's so
exactly
fucked up.
what the film is saying.
Yeah,
literally.
Going back to the humour for a second, did you know that Lil Ray ad-libbed almost all of his dialogue?
I did, but only because I read that on...
Okay.
I read that when I was doing my own research.
I love him. I think he's my favourite character.
Yeah. I think, like, jumping ahead, he deserves the ending he got.
I agree. I definitely agree. Going back to some of the music, the most memorable piece of music to me is it appears at a couple of points, but I think the one that sticks out in my mind is when they're driving to her family home.
Okay.
I think some of those shots as well, I read that Jordan Peele had intended those to mimic the aerial shots of the Torrances driving to the Overlook Hotel.
Well, funny, I don't know if you picked up on it, and I can't remember the context at all because all I've done is written the phrase Flight 237.
Oh, when Rod's on the phone outside the airport.
Oh, okay, and it's over the tannoy or something.
And there's something over the tannoy saying, yeah, Flight 237.
Like, oh, Shining.
Yeah, there's a few references. But yeah, those aerial shots were definitely directly influenced from The Shining, and the music is just so unique. Well, to my ears anyway. Apparently all of the lyrics are in Swahili.
Okay.
And I don't know the lyrics. I couldn't tell you. But apparently they kind of reflect the sentiments of the title. Kind of like get out, run away, those sort of sentiments.
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting. So even stuff like that is hidden. And if you don't know it, you're not going to know it. But if you do, it's just an extra little layer that you can peel back. It's just I
love it when filmmakers do that. Just on kind of retrospect and going back and looking through a film in which you know what happens. All of a sudden, everything was being told, being kind of shown to you, but you just weren't aware you were supposed to be listening at that time,
Yeah. I think, again, to go back to The Shining, like, there have been a couple documentaries about The Shining, obviously most notably Room 237, unpacking and unraveling all of what Kubrick may or may not have meant, and all of these conspiracy theories.
He faked the moon landing.
Did he fuck? But do you not think that Get Out is something that in 30 to 40 years' time, people might look at in the same way? What's a classic horror to us now? Like, I don't know. I just find it really interesting to look back at horror and see where we've come from and kind of go, well, this is considered a classic now, and try to figure out which films that are coming out now might still be thought of as fondly 40 years in the future.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think probably Jordan Peele's intentions were a bit less ambiguous, so it might not...
Oh, yeah, of course.
It probably wouldn't require the level of like scrutiny that The Shining has, for example.
I'm not sure The Shining required that level of scrutiny.
No, well, you know what I mean? Like, the level of scrutiny that it got.
Some people just got real obsessed.
But no, I like it marks a turning point, this film.
Yeah.
It's a key film in the horror genre. It's in so many different ways. So of course I think, of course it's going to be looked back in sort of a similar light.
It's funny, isn't it? Because like horror, black characters in horror are not new.
No.
Again, you mentioned horror noir earlier, so I'd like to come back to that a little bit. I think it's really interesting that to see the progression over the years, and the realization that things like the Universal monsters and like King Kong were all supposed to be allegories about black people. Isn't that awful? I feel ashamed because I didn't even realize. I love some of those movies.
And that's because, it comes down to ignorance on our part. Like, we're not kind of
ignorance on everyone's part. Definitely ignorance on the filmmaker's part. Like if they
ignorance in terms of not being cognizant of what the film was not saying, but where it drew its influences from and where it, you know what I mean.
It was kind of gross to see people talk about the physical characteristics of the monsters and how they're supposed to sort of be caricatures of black people. That's gross. Like it's made me view all those films very differently.
Yeah, I think it was a lot more subtle, because obviously you look at kind of like cartoons from that era. And
but that's what makes it insidious, though, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, exactly. But it's more. Everyone knows that cartoons of the 30s and 40s were racist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, could be racist. You know, even today, like Fantasia.
Oh God,
has a racist stereotype in it.
Oh Jesus Christ! Disney is just. Can we just take a minute to acknowledge the fact that Disney sacked Gina Carano over some, kind of ignorant, misjudged tweets, but she lost a job over it. And yet in the 90s, they hired convicted paedophile Victor Salva to direct Powder. Get in the fucking bin, Disney. How dare you?
It's capitalism at work. Capitalism at work.
Gross.
You make decisions based on what'll earn you more money.
I do not care for it.
Ethics? What are ethics?
Oh, God. Ethics are them going, woke Twitter is going mental. We should probably sack this person. That's their idea of ethics. What's going to make us look less bad? Genuinely, it's embarrassing. Ugh. Anyway. Did you know? I'm just going to start talking about really random stuff now, because coherence. What is coherence? Did you know that the name Armitage was intended as kind of like an homage to the Dunwich horror? Is it Dunwich or Dunwich?
I've always said Dunwich because that's the convention of how English, like Norwich. It's not Norwich, it's Norwich. And I think it being set in New England, I presume it has the sort of same naming conventions as UK towns.
I guess.
So I prefer Dunwich.
I guess I agree in that case. So Dunwich horror, apparently, like the main family in the Dunwich horror has the same surname. Apparently, I'm not familiar with it, which I thought was curious because didn't Jordan Peele also have some involvement in Lovecraft Country? Did he produce it?
I think he produced it, if memory serves. Yeah.
So, like, on face value, naming the racist family after a prominent family in a racist author's story makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then knowing Jordan Peele's involvement in Lovecraft Country, it makes me wonder if he's also just a fan of Lovecraft, and maybe... Because his work was great. The man himself, horrible. But his work was good.
Yeah, it's tough. I didn't pick up on that. I'm not like Lovecraft is one of those things that I know a lot about generally, but specifically I'm not kind of clued in on. And I've got the Necronomicon, and it's just such a pig to read that I've tried a couple of times, and
much eldritch, many tentacle.
Everything's eldritch or like cyclopean or like I swear he's just
I couldn't possibly describe it.
Non-Euclidean. Oh no, indescribable.
It's indescribable, but it had 15 tentacles.
But it kind of looked like a squid.
What a strange dude. So again, going back to kind of symbolism.
Yep.
One thing that I wanted to touch on is that I don't know like statistics of the likelihood of racism if you are left-leaning or right-leaning or vote for a certain political party. But I did think it was really interesting that at the garden party, all of the white people were wearing red. They all had some sort of red on.
Yeah.
Apart from Lakeith Stanfield, who had blue on his hat, and Chris, who had a blue shirt on. And I wondered if that was like a political statement, literally red versus blue, kind of Democrats versus Republicans.
If memory serves, red and blue are opposite in America. I think red's Republican and blue's Democrat, whereas here blue's conservative, which is right wing, and red is Labour, which is left wing. What that I didn't pick up on that, so I haven't really given it any thought. But I don't know. Maybe it does.
Again, but it can't be an accident, can it?
Maybe it points to their true like intentions, as it were, in the.
And red is danger. If you boil it down to its basic elements, red indicates danger. Yeah. There's a moment as well where at the garden party, I think Rose and Chris are both inside, and he's wearing a blue shirt and she's wearing a red and white striped top. So when they're stood next to each other, they look kind of like the American flag. It's really funny. Like,
I need to pick up on that next time. I'll give it a watch.
I thought that was really clever.
What did you think? And I haven't got any idea of what I think of it. So don't feel there's a right answer. But what did you think of the Japanese character in there? I forget his name.
In what sense? What do you mean? What did I think?
Like, obviously it's very much a kind of a white and black story.
So you think he represents some sort of middle ground?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what, if any, significance he has being there, because it feels so out of place within the movie, having a Japanese character when it's purely kind of bicultural, throughout.
I'll be honest, I hadn't considered that until you just mentioned it.
No, like
I acknowledged him, but it's not something I'd given any thought to.
And maybe there isn't any. I just wanted to bring it up because, for saying how race plays an important part, an integral part in the movie, it felt like an odd choice to have a Japanese character in it.
How is he treated in the movie? Like, he sort of.
I think he has like a scene, like it's not a couple of lines, like it's not like he's named. He's brought to the front and named as, so it's attention is brought to him as a Japanese character. But what significance that has to the overall themes, I wasn't really sure, and I wanted to see if you'd given any thought.
I hadn't.
No,
I'm sorry. That's a terrible answer, isn't it?
Because he's very much on the side of the Armitages, right? He's a party. He's a guest at the party, and everyone at that party is there for one thing. So he's not middle ground, or he's not neutral in any way. Like, he's definitely a bad guy in the film. But I don't know. I think
it's an interesting point, given how much attention is being brought to racism and hate crimes that have been perpetrated against Asian cultures that are generally not given much airtime. So I think it's kind of now it's quite timely that you bring that up, to be honest. I don't know. I wonder if perhaps he's there to kind of illustrate that you can be racist whilst also having people be racist against you, and that's kind of unique to his character, where it's obviously, as we've already established, white racism doesn't exist. Like the dominant, the race that's already kind of dominant, you can't perpetrate racism against them because they're already in power. So I don't know, maybe it's to kind of indicate that, I don't know. Or maybe he is just supposed to be some sort of middle ground. Yeah,
it just felt weird, like, because it's not a theme that's explored in any other way.
Is he the only non-white, non-black character in the film? I think he is, isn't he?
He's the only one that jumped out. I wasn't kind of keeping an eye on, like, extras and stuff, but...
Is Jumped Out the sequel to Get Out?
We'll find out, apparently.
Oh, do you think he'll ever make a sequel?
So
Because he's been questioned about it, hasn't he?
Yeah, so he's showing a lot of integrity about it, which I like, because Get Out is a film that has a message, right? And turning it into a sequel, if not done correctly, would reek of trying to cash in on the name alone, and which in turn dilutes the message, right? It dilutes the story. However, he has said, given that he has enjoyed the world he's created, he wouldn't be averse to making a sequel if the right story came to light.
That's a good answer. Good on him.
Yeah.
I
I really appreciate that integrity, because if he's enjoying
a lot of people would just be like, I'm being offered a job, dollar signs.
Yeah.
And they would bastardize their own work just to make some money.
And like, considering it's such a seminal film, you don't want that to be tarnished by kind of turning into a franchise, right?
I think that's kind of a perfect answer, because I don't know if I want to see a sequel to this film. But if he felt like, I have enough faith in him as an artist that if he felt like he could make a good sequel, then I'd be on board.
Yeah, and knowing us, knowing Get Out, knowing how deliberate he is as a filmmaker, he wouldn't do it carelessly. You know, and I think that's the key. That's the key, because if there is one, like you say, it will be done very deliberately, and it will have something to say. Something to say that hasn't necessarily already been addressed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about Catherine Keener's character, but I'd like to for a second. I read somewhere that a lot of people kind of assume that her character is called Missy because it's short for mistress, which is what female slave owners were referred to as.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's this whole hypnosis angle where she kind of wields power and control over people with a very literal silver spoon.
Yeah.
Talk about the ultimate symbol of privilege. Which I thought was pretty cool. And I think I read Jordan Peele sort of said that his explanation of what the sunken place is kind of how it feels to be Black and to try to bring light to these issues that you care deeply about and that are affecting you in the day-to-day. And you can shout as loud as you want, but you're still sort of silenced.
Yeah.
There's still going to be a lot of people who don't listen, who don't hear you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, because obviously, it becomes, as we see Chris kind of sinking into the sunken place, his view shrinks and shrinks and shrinks into this blackness. And it becomes more and more like a screen, as if he's looking out into another world through this screen, and it indicates this kind of like barrier, this separation between, someone that someone might be experiencing within a wider culture they're not familiar with.
Yeah. So the culmination of the film, when we find out the really batshit intentions of the creepy family, and we find out that Rose has kind of been this sociopathic collaborator the whole
scene
time.
Where she's on the phone, like sobbing her heart out.
Oh God, that's so well done.
And she's just completely like straight faced.
I'll be honest.
That blew me away.
At that point in time, I'd only seen Alison Williams in Girls.
Okay.
And I didn't credit her with being that great of an actress until that scene. I thought that was so well done. The fact that she's able to sort of switch between these almost like two completely different people.
Yeah.
Without making it comical.
Yeah.
I think it could easily have become funny, unintentionally funny.
It's chilling, like just seeing so much emotion pouring out of her voice, but seeing absolutely no emotion on her face, like complete deadpan. Like that's done so well.
Yeah, it's like, are you AI? What's happening? Very creepy. And the point, there's loads of stuff. There's so much stuff, and I'm struggling. Like, my brain is swimming with all of these things. Like the part where he tries to get away. The fact that the brother's weapon of choice is a lacrosse stick.
Yeah.
Like the nerdiest white sport of all time. Uh-huh. And also kind of not just associated with white, but associated with privileged white people.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So
Caleb Landry Jones is so good at playing arseholes.
Isn't he? He's kind of, I hate the term underrated because I think it's overused, but Caleb Landry Jones is an underrated actor. He should be in more stuff. He's been in some really high profile things, and like no one knows who he is.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Like I remember detesting him in The Last Exorcism.
Oh yeah.
Like so much because
he's great in Antiviral as well.
Have I seen that? I can't remember whether I've seen that or not.
You should if you haven't.
Okay.
He's good in that.
Add it to the list.
But the fact that when he tries to get Chris in a headlock and Chris is going for the door.
Yeah.
It kind of harks back to the conversation that they had around the dinner table about the magic number 3. Like, it takes 3 times. You have to be 3 moves ahead of your opponent in jiu-jitsu or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Whatever the idiot brother said was the superior martial art. And the fact that the brother kind of kicks the door shut as Chris is trying to reach for it and open it. And every time he tries, he kicks the door shut. But the 3rd time he goes to kick the door shut, he anticipates it, and that's when he stabs him in the leg. And I thought that was just, like, can we appreciate that chef kiss? It's just, like, I love it. The dialogue, every bit of dialogue, no bit of dialogue is wasted.
Yeah.
Everything means something.
Yeah.
And I think it's just fantastic.
One of the ones that jumped out, sorry, before you go on, was Bradley Whitford's character, whose name escapes me, talking about how his ancestors' claim to fame was beaten by Jesse Owens. And I think that there is, like, really kind of explains or explores the crux of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, just again, fetishization, idolation, but idolation to...
But jealousy, again.
Yeah.
Jealousy.
But to like a really extreme, intense, unhealthy, horrendous, extreme.
Yeah, like it ate away at him, kind of ruined his life. And then what he said his dad never got over it.
Yeah.
And that's why he chose to be put in a body that could run exceptionally fast. And obviously provides one of the weirdest, what the fuck, scariest moments in the film.
Yeah.
Like, imagine somebody just charging at you in the dead of night. That was brilliantly executed.
Yeah.
And just as you start to piece it together, it's just genius.
I love just everyone, like, is it Georgina as well? Just how they play these kind of, like, well, it turns out that these characters have gone through the process that the Armitages have. But just they're played so well. It's, her smiling and crying at the same time.
Oh my God, I forget the actor's name, but she's great. She was one of my favorites in I think it was the 3rd Purge movie that she was in. Okay. She's great.
Yeah.
And I think she was the cop in Upgrade as well.
Okay.
She's a really good actor. Again, underrated.
Yeah. Yeah. And like Lakeith Stanfield as well. Like they play these brilliant, like artificially happy characters so well, and it's just they reek of something going on underneath that you're not familiar with.
Yeah, on first watch it's so fucking eerie, and the minute you realise, oh, they're acting that way because they're old white people.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's like mental Tetris. Everything slots into place and you're like, oh God, yeah. That's why they're nerds. That's why they don't know what rat out means and say tattletale.
Yeah, of course. But the camera flash as well when Chris is trying to take a photo, and just the tension and the sudden kind of like emotion that creeps over over Lakeith Stanfield's
The
character's
terror.
face. Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. So we're kind of getting towards a point where I'd like to wrap up soon. The climactic moments of the film where we figure out everything that's happened. Chris has been knocked out. He's been tied to a chair. He's being made to watch this kind of the video. I don't know anything about is it coagula?
Something like that, yeah.
I don't know what the significance of that word is. I don't know what it means. I'm too dumb. I'm sorry. I don't have anything for you. It just reminds me of
Caligula, but... probably a separate thing.
The less said about Caligula, the better. There were fewer dicks in this, that's for sure. Yeah, and just the fact that he, to save himself, he picks cotton out of the chair arm.
Yeah.
Holy symbolism, Batman. It's so clever. It's so clever. And one thing again that makes me sad, and it makes me surprised, was that Jordan Peele said he didn't anticipate white audiences cheering when Chris gets the upper hand.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why anybody wouldn't, because to me,
like,
at
he's
that
the good
point,
guy. That's he's the protagonist. You cheer for like, it's as simple as that, or it should be as simple as that, right?
It is, yeah. I think to give people the benefit of the doubt, I think the majority of movie audiences probably, for most people, it boils down to good versus bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ultimately, most of us just want to see good prevail. That's far more satisfying. So it's at that point of the film, despite everything we've said, despite the themes, despite the symbolism and how intelligent and clever it all is, at that point, the good guy is defeating the bad guy, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
In that moment. And it's brilliantly done. And it's poetically done.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You know.
Even down to the part where he kind of escapes the house. He's in the car. He sees, I think that's at which point he perhaps sees the knight's helmet on the seat.
Oh, okay.
As he's escaping.
Gotcha, okay.
And Rose is standing out front of the house with a shotgun. And it kind of harks back to the line at the beginning of the movie saying, "Don't worry, my dad's not going to be waiting out front with a shotgun for you." It's so meticulously put together. I can't. I want to get inside Jordan Peele's brain.
That probably is a bad thing to say, considering.
I wouldn't go to the lengths that these people went to, because they are nuts. Philip, how dare you cast aspersions on my character?
I take it back.
I didn't mean it literally.
It just felt apt, is all.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be arranging slave bingo anytime soon. Don't worry. But yeah, so the ending was supposed to be different.
Okay.
They initially filmed quite a downbeat, hate to say it, realistic ending.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, yeah.
Because, I mean, obviously you have that moment, you see the lights flashing, and I think everybody's instinct is, oh no, after all of this.
It's such a subversion. Like, I remember seeing it and my heart sinking, because all of a sudden the symbol that in any other situation almost would be like the shining light of hope and the savior coming
for most horror movie protagonists.
All of a sudden you're like, shit, this isn't that film.
Yeah.
Like it's such a good move. Such a good move.
I'm really glad they went with that ending.
Yeah.
Really glad. It is sad to sort of consider the fact that, you probably would just expect the ending to be that, best case scenario, he gets life behind bars. Absolute best case scenario. So this was a brilliant kind of, like you say, subversion of that. And I'm so glad they went with it. It's such a satisfying ending.
Yeah, because like throughout the movie, it does play with expectations. You know, like I said, throughout, you know, even Stephen Root's character, who is called, I wrote it down, Hudson. You get the feeling these guys are like, oh, these guys are good guys. You know, Rose and Hudson, they don't mean him harm. They're secretly good. And nope, they're all just terrible people.
Nobody's spared. They're all in on it.
And again, like coming to that end, you're like, first there's police. Oh, the police are here. Fantastic. Everything's saved. And then, oh no, wait, it's not that film.
Yeah.
Then again, subversion. When you're like, oh no, it's not him. It's it's Rod.
Oh, Rod's brilliant. I just hope the dog was still all right.
I'm sure he was. I'm sure it's not.
I'm very concerned about the dog. Did the dog survive? That's generally my question in a horror film. Did the dog survive? So I think that's probably a really good time, a really good spot to wrap up, because although there is probably a ton more we could talk about and dive into,
of course,
I'm already sick of hearing my own voice, so I can only assume how bored you guys must be. Do you want to wrap up?
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like it's almost pointless at this point, because we've both just spent an hour and a half like verbally jizzing over how great this film is.
Horrendous. Please don't say that ever again.
Sorry, not sorry. All right, simping for Jordan Peele for an hour and a half.
Good enough. Fine, whatever. Yeah, I mean, you've said it there. I think it's such an important movie. It marks a turning point within culture, really. The horror genre. Sorry, in so many different ways. It manages to be to say something to both black and white audiences, which again, like maybe not have. It might not have been the intention, but like I said, you know, it as a metaphor, it shows kind of white liberal people that actually, if they're not careful, they risk being just as bad. Yeah. Which, amazing. Like, fantastic.
I think, to be honest, this film probably is going to end up, or has already ended up, being more important than Jordan Peele probably intended or could have hoped for. Yeah. Because, like we said, he intended it for black audiences, but the fact that white audiences are not only receptive to it and are enjoying it, but it might change some people's minds. It might give them a fresh perspective, which is incredible.
I think that's the thing. That's why hearing more black voices, filmmakers, whatever, authors, like anything like that is important, because it's so easy to live in your bubble and think, oh no, it's not that bad. And all of a sudden, like, from that first scene, you were shown how alien white suburban neighborhood can feel if you don't, in inverted commas, belong there. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah.
5 out of 5 would definitely watch again. Would recommend to a friend.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So with all of that out of the way, I would like to quickly say we freely and fully acknowledge that we are two privileged white people commenting on black cinema.
Yep.
And there's a good chance we may have said some incorrect stuff. You know, I hate the term woke, but I try to be as open-minded as possible.
Yeah.
I try not to be as preachy as possible, and I think you're the same, Phil. But you know, if there was anything we said that was incorrect or perhaps could have been construed as offensive, please do let us know. Like, we're completely open to criticism. That's how we all evolve. If we did anything wrong, let us know, and you know, we'll work to change that. But I had a blast talking about this film.
Yeah, I think we always knew it would be a good one to talk about.
Yeah, I hope we did it justice.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. I'm kind of interested to see what we might do for Black History Month next year.
Well, we've got, so Black History Month in February is the US. I think Black History Month in the UK is October.
Is it?
Yeah.
But October's Halloween. How dare they? No. October's about pumpkins.
Well, maybe then we do Candyman.
Ooh.
Mm.
Okay. Now you're talking.
We'll think about it.
We'll mull that over, and we'll be back with a mini-sode this week.
Yes.
Because this show is late, which we are very sorry for. It's my fault. I was ill and Rosie was moving and it was a bit of a disaster. But, you know, the shows are free, so you get what you pay for, guys.
And you should be grateful about it.
Damn right. But if you do pay for it, then you can expect a mini-sode this week as well.
Yeah.
Twofer. Double drop.
$2. That's all it is.
But until the mini-sode and until the next show, which will be episode 100.
You know, you're talking about how if you're too loud, it distorts your voice in audition.
Oh, maybe.
We'll see.
Shush. Can I motion that we all get drunk for episode 100?
I think we should.
Let's just turn it into a big drinking game. Right. I'm going to write this down before I forget it. And we're going to continue this conversation off the air. So thank you so much for listening, guys, and stay spooky.
Bye-bye.